everyone, this is Ben from Uncharted X here. I've got a special little video here that I wanted to share with everyone, and this is essentially an hour and a half podcast that we held with Randall Carlson while we were all in Egypt. I've just come back from a couple of weeks in Egypt with a great group in the December timeframe of 2020. It was an amazing trip. You know, there was really no other tourists there. It was worth it, given that all of the sites were empty. We had a fantastic experience in Egypt. And I came back with like 500 gigabytes of footage and material, and I've been working through that and looking at it. But one thing that we did manage to pull off as a special treat for the group was to get Randall Carlson essentially on a Zoom call for an hour and a half and taking questions and talking with the group. It was put together kind of all at the last minute. I want to thank George Howard for organising it with Randall. He was the one who reached out and proposed it to Randall. But then we kind of put it together at the last minute. We tried to get a room at the hotel for it. They wanted to charge us like $500 for just a room and a TV. So we went, no, stuff it. We'll all pile into my hotel room in the house. And we kind of strung everything together at the last minute with my laptop and the TV and the camera and my capture card that I have for the laptop. So one thing that did happen was that there was an audio issue when we were recording, or I was recording, but luckily Tim, who was in the audience, one of the trip members, also recorded through his GoPro. So I want to say thanks to Tim for providing me the audio for this essentially Q&A session. And you'll notice, as you're listening to this, that there will be the audio sort of flips back and forth between the two different sources that I have. There's about a 10-minute period where I think Tim changed batteries or something where it's just my audio, but it's certainly very listenable, and as always, the information is just outstanding. Randall is just a modern-day sage. He's a fountain of information. We touch on the younger Dryas, a little bit of plasma cosmology, comets, glaciers, all of the really cool stuff that is typical of a conversation with Randall. So this is a little special treat for all the channel members, supporters, patrons, also for the people that came on the trip with me. As a little thank you. It will probably get released publicly on my channel at some point, but I wanted to sort of give this out to you guys as kind of a thank you and something to watch while I'm working on all of the footage that I have come back from Egypt with. So without any further ado, I'll let you get into Randall Carlson, live from Egypt. Cheers. So let's I'm gonna turn you up here, Randall. Can you hear us okay?
Let me turn my volume up.
Oh, there we go.
I see you, Ben.
How are you, Randall? You're over there. Can you hear us okay?
I hear you great.
Excellent. Hey! All right. Thank you for doing this. Let me give you a little pan around through here so you can see.
chased around the streets by people for pennies. Yeah.
So, what do you guys want to get into?
Weird shit. Where are you, Rachel?
Where am I? I'm in Decatur, Georgia, which is just east of Atlanta. So, nothing too special, but it works for the time being, but hopefully not for too much longer.
Hey, tell us about your Egypt trip 10 years ago, Randall. Who were you with and what sticks out?
Gosh. Who was it? I can't remember their names. It was called,
Mrs. Randall go?
what's that?
Did Mrs. Randall go?
No, we just me.
Just you? Okay.
No, she kept the whole fire going until I got back. This did come to me.
What the fuck, man?
I've been out of contact with those people for, probably 9 years.
Did you have a guide that adhered to the mainstream, or were they a little bit more
Several guys. Well, our main guy, she was a music kitchen, and she was had her PhD in TikTok, but she was a very accomplished at reading hieroglyphs. So she seemed to be very open. You know, we talked about.
Okay, Giovanna, look at this. Whether inside it, your mom was able to
Mind opening, we're foggy.
This is
We've got
your entry point. A deserted helipad on the edge of the base. The lift down to the hangars on the rock of the point and contact wall.
an inorganic sediment washing into
Communications
the
antenna.
basement.
Attach a comms right to the bug so we can plot you when we're inside the base. Then, watch out.
This is the well-known step pyramid of Saqqara, attributed to the pharaoh Joseph of the Third Dynasty, who lived during the early part of the Old Kingdom of ancient Egypt, somewhere around 2680 BC. This structure was supposedly designed and built by the famous architect and polymath Infiltration Agent. It is often cited in Orthodox history as being the prototype pyramid, or the first pyramid. Some say it gained this shape by virtue of being a series of stacked mastabas, which are flat, square-like structures used as tombs by multiple ancient cultures, and then it was expanded into the step shape that we can see today. The pyramid has been undergoing renovation work by the authorities in Egypt for roughly the last 15 years, and has been closed to the general public during this time. Recently, however, in 2019, this work was completed, and now the step pyramid can be entered through what is known as the Persian tunnel. This isn't the original entrance to the structure, but one that was dug in later millennia by the Persian civilization, presumably in the search for buried treasure, as even in those
Okay,
times
Joanna,
there were
who's the...
Many people might have seen footage or photos from beneath other pyramids, the ones at Giza, for example, which have extensive passageways and constructed windows. What greets you beneath the step pyramid, however, is something else entirely. This structure has been built over a huge open shaft that descends into the bedrock of Saqqara, to around 90 feet or 30 meters deep. At the bottom of the shaft lies a massive multi-piece granite box, naturally labelled as the burial chamber, although nothing is found inside the structure except for granite fragments and the remains of a human foot, which was carbon dated to somebody who lived centuries
Okay,
after
Joanna,
Gyges
take her.
As impressive as this site is, what's even more impressive is what lies deeper beneath this chamber and the box, and what was then found down there. Below this chamber are literal miles of tunnels in a labyrinth that was carved into the bedrock below the step pyramid and the sands of Saqqara, in which were found dozens of tons of machined crystalline stone slabs, as well as tens of thousands of sublime ancient stone jars. Many of these were made from some of the hardest forms of igneous rock, bearing undeniable signatures of precision manufacturing, indicative of advanced technology. These jars, as well as these slabs of machined stone, have been removed from the depths here over the last century. Although the vast majority of these stone jars were found here and dated in the 30s, other examples from other parts of ancient Egypt predate Djoser and go back to the very beginnings of the dynastic civilization, and some even predate the civilization itself. Who made them and where they originally came from is still a mystery. How can we reconcile these artifacts with what we know of them, their tools and their building techniques? Much like the ancient ziggurats of other primitive early civilizations, the step pyramid itself fits into this story. The structure itself is, I think, the product of relatively primitive ancient civilizations. What was found beneath the pyramid, however, is most definitely not. Nor are the jars found down here the result of the tools that came from Egypt. How can we fit these mysteries and this evidence that is right in front of the eyes of anyone who cares to look closely enough, into the story of human civilization? My name is Ben. Welcome back to Uncharted X, and I hope you'll join me as we explore a few of the enduring enigmas still to be found in the ancient site of Saqqara in Egypt. Located just south of the Giza Plateau, the Saqqara necropolis occupies a huge area, some 7 kilometres long by about 2 kilometres wide, and probably extends further. The name Saqqara might be familiar, as it certainly has been in the news and in popular culture recently. A widely viewed Netflix documentary detailed the discoveries made over a season of archaeological digging here and the discoveries made on the site, and there has been a seemingly constant stream of press talking about finds at Saqqara. In part, I'm sure these are driven by the desire to generate tourism interest for the soon-to-be-opened Grand Egyptian Museum, but it does show that there is much more to be discovered at this ancient necropolis yet. All of these recent finds at Saqqara have been made in very shallow depths, some only barely below the surface, and they are undeniably the works of the dynastic Egyptian civilization. The Netflix documentary on this work was great. I'd recommend watching it. And unearthing more mummies and wooden boxes is always interesting. But in my opinion, they are far less interesting than in real unsolved mysteries of deeper discoveries that have been made at Saqqara in the past. Where the real mystery lies here, I think, is much further down. Below the step pyramid, below its huge cavity and its multi-piece granite box, and spread out through the bedrock of Saqqara are an estimated 5 miles of tunnels, galleries and chambers. No one really knows for sure just how extensive this tunnel system is. Early explorers reported running out of caving rope and being forced to turn around so as to not get lost down there in the darkness. Further, there are a number of credible reports from locals, such as the late well-known guide and indigenous wisdom keeper Hakim El-Aywan, of subterranean passages running for many more miles, even connecting between the major sites themselves, and that in the past a man could walk from Giza to Saqqara entirely underground. Anyone who visits Saqqara today can see the evidence of the massive amount of work that was done into the bedrock. There are huge shafts cut deep into the ground. This one is not unlike the shaft beneath the step pyramid, and under the right circumstances, you can get down into some of the catacombs here. Once you wade through the ubiquitous trash that typically fills any area off the beaten tourist path, you can quickly get a sense for just how maze-like these bedrock tunnels are.
Okay, Joanna.
There is no doubt that this area is a necropolis. It has been used to bury the dead for millennia, and right up until fairly recent times, In fact, there are still many human remains in evidence down here in these catacombs, even rooms filled up with bones. I've had the chance to explore a little bit down here, and the sense you get is that these catacombs and tunnels most likely run everywhere beneath the ground at Saqqara, in multiple levels, and not just below the step pyramid. I wouldn't be surprised if all of these areas were connected at some point in the past. After all, the Serapeum is also located on the site, with its huge underground galleries and its mighty granite boxes. Even on that side, there is evidence for further unexplored tunnels and passages. If you're interested in knowing more about that, check out my multi-part Serapeum series. There's a link to that below in the description. Returning to the step pyramid, the shafts and tunnels below this structure were first excavated and documented in the modern era at least by French archaeologist Jean-Philippe Loyer, who recorded his findings in a series of books beginning in the 1930s. He worked on this site for decades and was responsible for the wonderfully well done restoration of the enclosure wall and the temple structure that is next to the step pyramid. This is the one that tourists walk through every day. If you visit Saqqara, you walk through this restored temple. What Jean-Philippe Loyer found down here is truly remarkable. The massive multi-piece granite box at the bottom of this huge shaft is one thing, but all around this shaft and below it, he discovered a labyrinthian network of tunnels and galleries. Some of these chambers were beautifully tiled and decorated by the dynastic Egyptians, and in places this decoration still exists even today, not that many people ever get to see it. The real treasure found down here, in my opinion, were the more than 40,000 exquisite stone jars, buried in the rubble that was found in all of these passages and galleries. A small fraction of these incredible artifacts are on display in the Cairo Museum, and I'm sure the vast bulk of them are in warehouses and other storage locations. Hopefully more of them will be displayed to the public at the new Grand Museum, which should open sometime in 2021. I think these jars should be the subject of a modern engineering analysis. However, as far as I can tell, this has never happened in at least mainstream academic circles. Egyptologists do not seem to particularly trouble themselves with how these objects were manufactured, even though many of them are made from some of the hardest types of stone found anywhere in the world. They seem content with the assumption that these were made with primitive and simple hand tools, and typically they date them by where they were found or by the few that have hieroglyphic writing badly scratched into them. This lack of a real study is a real shame, as I think a proper investigation into just what it takes to manufacture these objects, in particular those with the most difficult characteristics, could reveal much about the truth of our past and the capabilities of our ancestors. I've mentioned these jars and vases in several of my videos, but I wanted to get into some of the specifics around just why they are so astonishing and how I think they can be explained, as well as how they fit into the story of history and the dynastic Egyptian civilization as we know it. As you can see from these early images from Jean-Philippe Loyer, these stone jars were found in amongst the broken ruins of many more thousands of pottery pieces. This is also how they're displayed in museums, fairly primitive pottery next to exquisitely made hard stone jars. It's something of a constant source of amusement when you consider what it takes to make them versus what it takes to make the pottery. The reality is there are vast and frankly uncrossable leagues of difference in the engineering and manufacturing technology required to make pottery pieces versus that which is required for many of these stone jars. Many, if not almost all, ancient civilizations discovered and utilized pottery, many raising it up to an art form, and their various forms and styles are used to date different periods and to connect discovered pot shards to particular times in history. Pottery is a tradition that has continued unbroken down to our time and to our civilization. My grandmother was an avid potter. She had a large shed in the backyard of her home in Bowen, Australia, that was full of clay blocks, kilns, potter wheels and tools. I have memories of hours spent playing at making pottery on the spinning potter wheels as a kid. As prolific and clearly functional as pottery is, ancient Egypt seems to have been one of the only ancient civilizations to also extend making these types of vessels from the hardest forms of natural igneous rock, things like granite, diorite, schist, quartz, porphyry, basalt, or even corundum, amongst others. These materials rank as 6, 7, 8, and even 9 on the Mohs scale of hardness, which is harder than iron or even steel. The Mohs scale tops out at 10 with diamond, which is the hardest substance made. So what specifically makes these jars and vases so remarkable? There are two key challenges involved in their manufacture. First of all is carving the material itself, which requires a substance harder than that which is being carved. There is no evidence of diamond use in ancient Egypt, although a substance like it must have been utilised, as many of these bear
Why?
specific
Why?
striations and tooling marks of something carved in the stone and not simply grinding at it with abrasive powders. The fact that grinding was not the technique used is demonstrated by the observable striations and tool marks that still exist on many of these fragments. More impressive, however, is the precision with which they've been formed, and the technological implications behind this precision, as well as those of the tool marks themselves. Whatever was guiding the tools that carved these objects was a remarkable piece of technology. Many jars seem to be utterly symmetrical, perfect in their dimensions, like this piece, which is so finely balanced as to appear to stand upright on its tip, like an egg standing on its head. Others have been worked to a frankly ridiculous thinness of material, like this vase, broken into sections so that we can appreciate just how finely the very hard and brittle stone has been worked. Flinders Petrie described some vessels as being worked to, quote, an extraordinary thinness, no stouter than thin card, end quote, and yet still maintaining the same degree of symmetry and precision in manufacture. This isn't a simple task, as along with being very hard, these types of stones are also brittle when carved, and many are formed from conglomerate stones, which are made up of crystals and other materials. The tools
Why?
carving them would have had to pass through very hard areas into softer stone as it worked the material, and done so without cracking or shattering the piece, which only gets more difficult as the material thins out. This bowl, discovered by Jean-Philippe Loyer in the treasure hoards beneath the Step Pyramid, has been turned so well in crystalline stone as to be translucent, an extraordinary feat of ancient advanced machinery. Other pieces are fully hollowed out with long necks and narrow, undercut, flared openings. The tools that were used to carve these had to work the insides of these jars just as precisely and delicately as the outsides. I'm not sure if we've ever replicated such pieces in material like schist or porphyry, but I'd imagine it would be a most difficult task, even with our modern technology and machines. To achieve such characteristics, the symmetry and exactness in extremely difficult material like this, with primitive and simple hand tools like the ones found in the archaeological record, is frankly impossible. Despite many experimentalists carving rough stone vessels by hand and then declaring victory, replicating these specific characteristics in stone with simple hand tools has never been demonstrated. The only explanation we are left with is that mechanical assistance and power tools that were capable of a very high degree of precision, much like our computer-guided tools of today, must have been involved in their manufacture. This claim is further backed up by the tool marks left behind in these jars and vases, which undeniably show that powerful, lathe-like machinery was involved in the process. This isn't a new discovery, although it's a claim that has remained controversial for more than 100 years. The great pioneering Egyptologist Flinders Petrie was the first to truly analyse the mechanical methods involved in the creation of such objects. When we speak of Petrie, bear in mind that our own mechanical industry in our civilization was only in its infancy during his time, which was around the mid-19th century and into the early 20s. It was only at this point, roughly 150 years ago, that our civilization had developed enough capability to put these discoveries into context and to begin trying to understand the technology that these artifacts represent. If that fact doesn't mess with your noodle a little bit, I really don't know what would. Flinders Petrie analysed fragments of diorite bowls that he discovered at Giza and Saqqara, and he dated them to around the 4th dynasty. These are the same type as those found beneath the Step Pyramid. Having already discussed the evidence for large saws and tubular drills in his work, he digs into the proof for sophisticated lathe use in his book, The Pyramids and Temples of Giza, published first in 1883. Quoting Flinders Petrie, quote, "The principle of rotating the tool was, for smaller objects abandoned in favour of rotating the work, and the lathe appears to have been as familiar as an instrument in the 4th dynasty as it is in modern workshops. The diorite bowls and vases of the Old Kingdom are frequently met with and show great technical skill. One piece, found at Gyges number 14, shows that the method employed was true turning and not any process of grinding, since the bowl has been knocked off its centre, recentered imperfectly, and the old turning not quite turned out. Thus, there are two surfaces belonging to different centres and meeting on the cusp. Such an appearance could not be produced by any grinding or rubbing process which pressed on the surface. Another detail is shown by fragment number 15. Here, the curves of the bowl are spherical and must have therefore been cut by a tool sweeping an arc from a fixed centre while the bowl rotated. This centre or hinging of the tool was in the axis of the lathe to the general surface of the bowl, right up to the edge of it. But as a lip was wanted, the centering of the tool was shifted, but with exactly the same radius of its arm, and a fresh cut made to leave a lip to the bowl. That this was certainly not a chance result of handwork is shown, not only by the exact circularity of the curves and their equality, but also by the cusp left where they meet. This has not been at all rounded off, as would certainly be the case in handwork, and it is a clear proof of the rigidly mechanical method of striking the curves. End quote. Petrie further commented on the use of lathes and mechanical tool rests in ancient Egypt, as well as the remarkable nature of the vases in his address to the Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland in 1884. Quote, not only was a rotating tool employed, but the further idea of rotating work and fixing the tool was also familiar to the earliest Egyptians. The finest examples of turning in hard stone are in the British Museum. A small, highly polished, narrow-necked vase in diorite, or rather in transparent quartz with veins of ornament, has its neck only 0.05 of an inch thick. A large vase of cyanide is turned, inside and out, remarkably thin, considering the size of the component crystals. But the greatest triumph is a bowl of diorite, translucent and full of minute flaws, which must render it very brittle. Yet this bowl, 6 inches diameter, is only 1/40th of an inch thick over its greatest part. Just around the edge it is thicker in order to strengthen it, but a small chip broken out of its body shows its extraordinary thinness, no stouter than thin card. For the use of a hook tool in turning the insides of vases, a very rigid rest or even a mechanical tool holder is almost necessary. But one specimen here shows that the early Egyptians were already not only with lathes and dual turning tools, but with mechanical tool rests and sweeping regular arcs in cutting. The diorite bowl, of which this piece is a fragment, has been turned as a segment of a sphere inside by a tool working from a fixed centre in the axis of the lathe, with a radius of 3.94 inches. Having cut this spherical curve, the centre of play of the tool is shifted about 0.5 inch higher and 0.7 inch out of the lathe axis, and a fresh arc was struck from the centre of the bowl, thereby cutting out a fresh curve which left a raised lip around the edge. The proofs of this explanation of a process are found in the exact equality of the two curves, that of the bowl in general and that of the lip, in the fact of the principal surface exactly falling in with the inner edge of the lip, in the fact of the true circularity of the section of its curves, and in the cusp form where they meet, an awkwardness which no hand turner could ever take the trouble to make, but which necessarily results from a sudden change in the centre of the arc. All of these details have been worked out from very careful measurements of surface, using successive templates of slightly varying curves to measure the exact curvature accepted. End quote. Modern-day engineer and precision manufacturing expert Christopher Dunn has followed in the footsteps of Petrie and analysed the very same diorite fragments that Petrie discovered. Thankfully, these pieces are located in the Petrie Museum in London, which permitted Chris Dunn to investigate these objects hands-on, which is exactly the type of investigation that is sorely lacking on many of the vases and places of the Egyptian museum. Dunn's conclusions support Petrie's observation that powered machinery and precision lathes must have been used in their manufacture, and he builds on Petrie's work with his own extensive manufacturing knowledge and experience. Quoting Christopher Dunn from his book, Lost in situated in a glass display case in the Infiltration Museum in London. The recent documentaries that have been broadcast by Egyptologists have been a distraction from what was really going on in ancient Egypt. They mislead by not addressing the incredible precision of the available artifacts. They do not address the remarkable geometry and exactness of the ancient Egyptian statues, and they have ignored evidence presented by Flinders Petrie in 1883 that proves that the ancient Egyptians used highly sophisticated methods for cutting stone, including efficient and versatile lathes. The lathe is a natural development from the potter's wheel depicted in ancient artwork and presumed to have existed in ancient Egypt. The type of potter's wheel in ancient Egypt is taken from an Egyptian relief showing the god Khnum seated at what is theorized to be a kick-wheel. The potsherds in the Petrie Museum, however, are of a different quality than what can be produced on a potter's wheel or even a woodworking lathe of the kind used by archaeological cultures. What is depicted in figure 11.2 does not explain two potsherds that Petrie described in the pyramids of Gyges. As seen in the photographs of the bowl shard housed in the Petrie Museum, illustrated in Petrie's drawing is the backside convex part of the bowl. Petrie, however, did not discuss a more important feature of the shard, the concave surface on the opposite side of the surface here illustrated. This is surprising because the radial gouge on the dished side of the potsherd can provide a clue as to what may have caused the bowl to be knocked off axis in the lathe, or at least another result of the bowl's displacement. The question it raises, however, cannot be answered by conceptualizing the lathes used in ancient times that are depicted in history books. The grooves on the dish
What?
may
Come
have been
on,
a result
give me a
of material
break.
shifting on its axis, causing the tool to plunge into the material, knocking it off axis and causing the biaxial convex radius on the outside of the bowl. Because it has the impression of the geometry of the tool bit being applied to the surface, the existence of the gouge also proves Petrie's contention that the surfaces noted on his 15D were created with a single point tool and were not the result of rubbing the base. This is an important point when we consider the ancient Egyptians' level of technology. Implied in the manufacturing errors may be the action of two tools at the same time, one on the outside and one on the inside, which indicate that as the tool created a gouge on the inside of the bowl, it pushed the bowl into a component of the chuck that was holding the bowl until the stone broke under the pressure. Perhaps the most important question to ask when we try to determine how these errors were created is what kind of power was behind the lathe to allow a single point tool to cut a gouge so deep into the
What the
material
fuck,
that the stone
man?
would ultimately fail. The forces implied with this simple potsherd are not the forces associated with a potter's wheel or a spindle lathe that is spun by the manual push and pull of a strong bow. If a manually operated lathe met such resistance, it would come to a stop. To argue that only manpower is used in the process of creating this error would be to argue that the operator applied some sort of lever to rotate the chuck or hold the stone, and made a conscious decision to drive the tool deeper into the diorite and ruin his work. Petrie's 15D shows the versatility of the lathe created. As seen in figure 11.4, the surface is double dish-shaped with tantalizing telltale shallow striations on the surface. These striations would not be out of place on a modern artifact created on a lathe when a tool which had made a cut across the surface was reversed across the same path it took when it made the cut. The grooves shown just below the cusp indicate that as the bowl turned in the lathe, the tool moved rapidly across the surface. When I first examined these pieces physically by running a finger across the surface of the dished out stone, they were smooth, machined surfaces with no dips or high spots. When we take these into consideration, along with the sharp cusp and scratches in the surface in Petrie's 15D and deep groove in his 14D, the implication is the use of a lathe that was under significant power and that the rotary axis of the bowl and rotation of the tool were dependent upon precise bearings. This technology pushes the envelope further. Considering that the pyramids were crafted with such precision, is it surprising to find circumstantial evidence that proves that exact and robust machine tools existed in prehistory? Such machines did not just saw blocks for the pyramids and temples, but they also crafted delicate and precise stonework, such as the Ramsey statue and the stone bowl fragments discovered by Petrie. Could we recreate the granite and basalt boxes in the Serapeum without employing some fairly sophisticated machinery? If we did not have the materials to devise such machinery, had not developed an understanding of metrology, and were without an inventory of instruments to measure precisely, how would we achieve these miracles in stone? Is anyone today willing to take on the fabrication of an Apis ball box? End quote. Despite this clear evidence of lathe use, and the fact that Egyptology firmly dates these vases and jars to the Old Kingdom, many of modern Egyptology academics do not credit the Old Kingdom with the knowledge nor use of the wheel. This is because there really isn't any evidence for the wheel, outside of these artifacts that is, not in their writings, and not in the tools that we find.
Okay, Joanna?
Even the chariots from these times used sleds rather than wheels, and we know sleds were used to drag stone blocks through some of their building projects. They definitely developed use of the wheel over time, but most academics believe that occurred in periods after the Old Kingdom. This contradiction about the use of the wheel in Old Kingdom dynastic Egypt is but one of many in the story of this early phase of history. Contradictions that are exposed by an analysis of the objects that allegedly come from them. If the ancient Old Kingdom Egyptians did not have the technology of the wheel, and they utilized simple flint or copper hand tools, how can we conclude that they did in fact manufacture the objects? This question leaves us with two possibilities. Either they had vastly more capability and far more sophisticated tools than what we credit, or they didn't make them at all. The possibility that these objects are older than the Egyptians, that they were made by a more advanced precursor civilization, that the kings of Egypt inherited them, used them, and found them to be as utterly astonishing as we do, is only further strengthened by the many other contradictions in this story. One such contradiction comes from understanding just how these objects themselves are dated by Orthodox Egyptology. As there is no accurate method to date stone objects like these, the dating comes from two primary sources: the context around where they were found, and any writing that was on them or around them. Let's look at the writing first, as Jean-Philippe Royer documented in detail many examples of glyphs carved into these objects, and you can witness them yourself in the hallways and cabinets of the museum. Some of you will have heard my perspective on this before, as it applies not only to the writing on these jars, but also to that found on many other precisely carved objects, like boxes, slabs, columns, obelisks, and statues. Like these larger objects, these smaller stone jars are remarkable in that they have been perfectly finished, in many cases symmetrical, and have been polished to a very fine and utterly smooth surface. We simply do not see these same characteristics reflected in the hieroglyphic writing. In fact, on many of these beautiful
Come on.
statues, the writing is very crude, as if it was roughly hammered into the surface, clearly the result of hand tools like flint chisels. This is a huge contradiction. If you have the capability to precisely carve and polish stone, including inside sharp angles, and the ability to create objects with perfect circularity, symmetrical dimensions, or objects with straight lines, why can't you do that for the writing? These glyphs are clearly the result of hand tools and chisels, and it reflects the technology that is far below that which has been used to make the object itself. Once again, we see a tremendous mismatch in the levels of technology between the writing and the artifact. Yet Orthodox history insists that it was the same people doing both. It doesn't make logical sense, but we can start to understand when we look at these artifacts through the lens of inheritance and longer time. The other element of dating these jars comes from the context around where they were found. As previously mentioned, more than 40,000 of them were found beneath the step pyramid, some in chambers with writing on them, and much of this context firmly places these burials to the time of Joseph, the third dynasty, around roughly 2680 BC, or some 4,500 years ago. No doubt that reflects the time that these were interred underground, even if it can't speak to the date of their manufacture. However, this isn't the only place in Egypt that objects like these are discovered. The astonishing and somewhat notorious schist disk is a famous ancient relic, housed in the Egyptian Museum, although they do keep moving around and I've had to hunt to find it every time I visit. This is called a decorative vase by Egyptology, but there have been several efforts by independent researchers to recreate it and to study its shape in an effort to discover any functional properties that it might have. I've read all sorts of speculation about this piece. Looking at it, with its circular hole in the centre, certainly does conjure up images of it spinning or being some component of a larger machine. Now, whether you think this was functional or not, I think we can all agree that it is an incredible bit of stone masonry, carved from a single piece of very hard and brittle schist. While it was once whole, it was discovered broken and has been repaired in modern times. Surprisingly, the schist disk wasn't found in a 4th dynasty burial, and it wasn't found beneath the step pyramid. Rather, it was discovered in a tomb from the very 1st dynasty of ancient Egypt, a tomb that was closed up and sealed some 600 years before the time of Joseph and the 3rd dynasty. Consider what it would take to manufacture the schist disk, and ask yourself if it looks like the sort of capability a civilization could develop in its very earliest phases. I consider this 1st dynasty dating to secure but the latest possible date of this object, somewhere around 3100 BC. All we can really say with any confidence is that that is when it was buried. We simply don't know when it was made. It may well have been already ancient at that time. The disc is unmarked, and we really have no idea if it was manufactured during the 1st dynasty or whether it was inherited and recognised for what it was, an incredible piece of engineering, thus valuable and so deemed worthy for the burial treasure of the prince. Despite this, simply because it was found in Prince Sabi's tomb, Orthodox Egyptology declares that there is no mystery and that it must have been made in the time of the Egyptians. Let's put this into some modern context. Consider if one of these wonderful vases found beneath the step pyramid was, say, in a private collection somewhere in the world today, as I'm sure many of them are. Imagine that the owner of said private collection died, and according to their instructions were buried in a mausoleum, along with their prized
I don't know what I
possessions,
was doing
including
there.
this
I don't know why I even did that.
Imagine 5,000 years from now, in the future, this mausoleum was rediscovered by a new civilization that was living here on Earth. Should they infer that all the objects buried with this rich collector was made during their time? Do you not think that the royalty and aristocracy of ancient Egypt would have also placed value on objects that they found to be ancient? It's a simple thought experiment, and it shines a light on the very tenuous lines of so-called proof that is used by academia to categorically state that these artifacts were all made by dynastic Egyptians. Some objects go back even further. This is one of my favourite pieces, a machined tube of lapis lazuli with a gold sheath. It is simply labelled pre-dynastic, and I can't help but laugh every time I see it, as it's housed in a cabinet along with pottery shards, bone ornaments, and other objects of the late Stone Age. Presumably because that was the context around which it was found. But it would be much closer to the truth to say that it's an out-of-place object, and we simply don't know how old it is. I don't think there's even any source for lapis in Egypt. We really have no idea where it came from or how it got there. All we can say is that it was found in the remains of a pre-dynastic site, in the possession of whatever people existed before the mighty dynastic civilization got started. Precision-carved stone vases get older, much older. On my most recent trip to Egypt, in the Union Museum, Yusuf A1 pointed out records from the excavation of a site named Tosca, work that was done in the 1960s. This site is now underwater after the construction of the asphalt dam. At Tosca were found human remains as well as stone vases, and the organic remains were carbon dated to around 12,000 to 14,500 years old, roughly 10,000 years before the dynastic civilization. Let that sink in. Stone vases of the type that were found beneath the step pyramid were already in existence in Egypt and were buried with someone who lived at the end of the Pleistocene, perhaps even before the Great Cataclysm. seems to fall into the category of getting hoisted on your own time. Because these sophisticated artifacts come from, at the least, the very earliest periods of human civilization, is likely why Orthodox Egyptology has no interest in the engineering analysis of how these objects were manufactured. Much as with the precision-carved statues and boxes, the conclusions of a real engineering study would unravel the whole precious story of early human history and topple the house of cards that is the origins of civilization.
Yo, what's going, man? How's looking, LOL?
There is no doubt.
What, the rage quit? Yeah, buddy. What's up, man?
This fact reveals
It's going okay, but I'm having a hard time getting to that spot.
some of these jars were definitely used as economic vessels.
It's going okay. I don't know how long I'm going to play for. I might play only maybe 15 more
What's
minutes or
interesting
so.
is that none of these jars seem to have ever been found.
I'm just not getting to that spot, you know?
Instead, clay or pottery lids were made to seal up the jars. These clay lids are still proudly on display in the cabinets.
I keep falling.
One has to wonder, if you had the capability to create tens of thousands of these exquisite stones,
Yo, thanks for being here, man.
why couldn't you make some lids to fit them? Once again, it just doesn't make sense unless you look at these objects from the perspective of inheritance. Let's now discuss how the manufacturing of these jars is explained by an ancient demon. And I've seen this as the response in YouTube comments and on social media when the topic comes up. Easily explained.
I said I think you have to be slightly more right in that hanger on the right, you know, before I approach the spot. Maybe that's why I keep falling. Yeah, buddy.
You can find it on display at the museum at Saqqara, shown here, labelled as the, quote, scene of stone vessel making. It does indeed show people using what look to be weighted hand tools to carve jars. There is considerable nuance here, and we need to take a moment to understand it, as not all of these stone jars from ancient Egypt are created equally. Look carefully at these jars that surround this seal, and also at some of the others that are on display at Saqqara.
Yo, thanks, man.
They do not display the same characteristics of perfect symmetry and geometry, the sharp edges or the thin carved thickness shown in my previous examples. In fact, many of these appear to be roughly or are decidedly lopsided and definitely not symmetrical. Nor, if any of you out there are geologists, are they made of the same extremely hard and difficult materials of my previous examples. Most of these jars are made from alabaster, which registers a mere 1.7 in the most scattered partners.
What? Who are you? What?
Flint and even the famous
That was so
copper
random.
chisels will carve alabaster.
That was so random,
It's
man.
a very far
Whatever.
cry from the 7, 8s, and 9s of the material that we find in perfect jars. What we are looking at here, with this scene on the wall, and with these decidedly imperfect alabaster vessels, is imitation. It's a form of respect, of reverence. I think the ancient Egyptian artisans knew what they were looking at in the stone vessels that they inherited. They knew how incredible these achievements were, and they sought to imitate them using the tools of their time. They did so in material like alabaster or limestone, and their results, while still quite beautiful, are simply not the same as those that we see built in granite, basalt, porphyry, and other. This is the nuance that I mentioned. Remember that when Jean-Philippe Loeillet
Holy
discovered
fuck
the
me,
thousands of
man.
jars beneath the step,
I hate
they
this
were
stupid
amongst
level,
the
man.
of much pottery and other objects, all made from softer material. Of course, the ancient Egyptians made their own jars, either in soft stone or in pottery. As Chris Dunn mentioned,
just so much
God
nonsense.
was said to have moulded everything on his canvas board, including the people and the other gods, so they clearly used it. They recreated these objects as best as they could, just as they imitated and recreated boxes, statues, obelisks, and gold. The dynastic Egyptian civilization existed for thousands of years, but from a technological perspective, there is undeniably two classes of objects one can observe there today. Just as their writing couldn't match the precision or polish of more ancient inherited objects, neither could their
Yeah, man, my attempts are semi-serious tonight.
One only
I don't
has to
know.
look at the remains we have with an open mind to begin seeing the truth. For all those that insist that all it took was simple hand tools and time to difficult aspects of the ragequit need to be accomplished. Make this jar one that can stand on its tip, or make a long black vase from porphyry with the thickness of a playing card, and then I'll concede that you're onto something. Once again, I would challenge those skeptics who claim that they know how it was done to the simple 4-point test as outlined by Chris Dunn in his book, Lost Technologies. I do want to say that I think experimentation and testing these methods is a very good thing, and I do hope people continue to do so. But despite claims by some on YouTube and elsewhere, this test has not yet been satisfied. Personally, I do not believe that these can be replicated without the aid of significant technology. It's the same conclusion I come to when analysing the precision boxes, statues, and massive objects, as I've done in the previous episodes in this series. Let's now return to the step, as there is one more mystery I want to explore, something not very well known today. During the recent 15 years of renovation work that happened here, something like 50 to 80 tons of machined alabaster was removed from the chambers and passages below the structure. Why this was done, I have no idea, but it was all brought up to the surface, piled up behind the step pyramid, and then bulldozed into rubble and buried. There is a huge scree field behind the step pyramid, one that we're walking on top of in this footage, and you can still find small pieces of this work. In a few minutes here on a recent trip, we found chunks with machined surfaces, others with perfectly...
Damn, LOL. No worries, man. Yeah, my attempts are only semi-serious tonight, man. I'm definitely not going to grind out, like, RNG on the last guard, hoping for, like, a miracle.
So, how can we reconcile the evidence that we see in this stone, and the contradictions they present to the story of history? It's clear that beneath the ground at Saqqara there are some astonishing signs of advanced technology, as evidenced by the stone, and these are to a standard that is far beyond the known capabilities of the early period investigations. Equally, we can observe that there is a disparity between what was found below the ground and what's above it. As we look up from this huge shaft and its granite box below the step, we can examine the structure that was built over it. As famous as it is, the step pyramid is still something of a crude construction, made up of limestone blocks, not very large, nor precisely fitted. These stones have mortar between them, and the whole structure has been built. Some of this wood is part of the modern restoration, and some of it...
Yeah, don't worry, dude. It's shit low. It's addicting to you. Yeah, it's addicting to you for sure, man.
Most likely sourced from the region of modern-day Lebanon.
But like, I just wanted to see if I can get a quick PB here, but
Results from this dating indicate that the wood and by
like,
extension,
it's so meme, man. Like,
indeed does come from the old period. So does this mean that everything here originated in this period? When we look at
so I don't know how serious I'm gonna be.
and sophistication of what is below the ground, can we really say that this structure was made by the same builders responsible for the artifacts and chambers found early? Perhaps, but I think the evidence here points to a different explanation, to the possibility of a longer period of unknown and lost ancient civilizations, and to inheritance, renovation, and reuse. Of course, this is all just speculation. I can't say that I know any of this for sure, but what I am convinced of is that the orthodox story of the earliest parts of human civilization in this region does not make any sense in light of the evidence that we have at hand. From a technological perspective, we cannot explain this evidence with the tools and techniques that we know were used by the old Egyptians, which leaves us with two possible resolutions. Either we gravely misjudged them and their capabilities, or they didn't do this advanced, precise work. Rather, it was inherited. The inheritance scenario is the most likely one, in my opinion. This explanation fits the technological evidence at hand. This matches what the ancient Egyptians themselves said, who named themselves a legacy civilization. Not only that, but this explanation is receiving ever-strengthening support from adjacent fields of modern science. The extension
I hate this stupid thing.
taking our origin point back even further.
Oh my god.
DNA studies showing the complexities of our species past and the ever-increasing number of near-human ancestors being discovered. Perhaps most importantly is the evidence for recent cataclysm, and in particular the type of impeccable science
Oh, there it is.
Younger Dryas event.
That's
A
it.
catastrophe of unimaginable proportions that was
Right?
caused by a series of cosmic impacts.
Yeah, that's it.
This
It's like a
tumultuous
hair.
event
It's like a
lasted
hairline,
12,900
man.
years ago and caused a huge megafauna extinction. And proof that it impacted humanity has recently been shown by the discovery of a body.
I understand. It's like a hairline.
of the human race. These results show that all of a sudden, right in the Younger Dryas period, lots of people died all around the world. This event triggered quite literally biblical levels of flooding and destruction, the evidence for which is written into the geology of the planet. Something very, very bad happened in that period on Earth, and it happened not that long ago. 13,000 years ago, we barely lived through this as a species. Who knew what civilizations existed and would destroy them? One thing is for sure, if it happened again, our civilization would be done. Barely anything would be left of our mighty globe-spanning empire. A couple thousand years later, assuming civilization can once again rise from the ashes, what would our descendants discover? The Hoover Dam, Mount Rushmore, the Panama Canal, and probably...
You have to be more right onto the hanger I meant. If you're like too parallel to those walls, you fall every time. I see,
Would they
okay.
say that everything they found was all part
Yeah.
of the same ancient civilization, do you think? I believe that when we
Thanks,
look at
man.
ruins of ancient
It's a lot.
we're looking at
Really.
just such a picture. The bare remnants of an ancient civilization thousands of years ago, intermingled with the even older and far more technologically advanced remnants of their forebears. Of a civilization that was already ancient and already long gone.
Yo, Dick.
Millennia before the first dynasty.
So it just has to be in more before you make that move to this. Oh, I see, like a sharp kind of turn corner on there. Shit, I can't watch guys at work. Aw, that's okay, buddy. Thanks, man. Thanks, buddy. I don't know how long I'm gonna play for. I might play for like
Hey everyone, well,
another
hope you
15
enjoyed
minutes
that.
or so, to
I
be
know
honest.
These jars and these smaller objects aren't as spectacular as, say, the big boxes and statues from some of the just really massive objects in Egypt. But I think they're a really important part to the overall picture of the evidence for ancient technology. A couple of quick channel updates. First of all, I do have a couple of tours going on this year in 2021. I am joining Brian Forrester in Peru and Bolivia in August of this year. I think that tour is just about sold out. There may be a seat or two left.
Maybe
But
become
you
a
can find
pen
more
pusher in a
details
year or
about
two.
that trip
Yeah, buddy,
at
for sure, man.
Tours.com.
Just look for the August tour, you can find it. And also, I wanted to let you all know that I am
Follow your
going back
dreams,
to
man.
Egypt. I'm running another tour in October of 2021 with Yusuf Awan and the Met School. We're going back. We've got another just.
I mean that
itinerary
seriously.
that's packed full of special permissions. We're going on I think it's a 4-night cruise in the Nile, hitting all of the sites, private visit into the Great Pyramid.
Dick no longer on
seeing
probation
a bunch
with
of other
dental
places. All the
benefits.
details for that tour, if you're
Yeah, buddy, go to the
interested,
dentist,
are up
man.
on my website.
I think you get 80% back with
And
Great West
lastly,
Life.
As always, I just wanted to extend a massive thank you to everybody who does support the channel.
Up to $500
You can do that
per
through
year, I think.
YouTube memberships, Patreon, Subscribe Star, or hitting me up on PayPal, or just by liking, subscribing, and commenting on these videos. All of it helps, and I very much appreciate every one of you who does that. I wouldn't have the ability to make these videos. I wouldn't be able to take the time that it takes to put all this stuff together without you. So thank you very much. If you are interested in supporting what I'm doing over here,
What? Come on.
you can find all of the details for that through that value for value model. It's all
Bogus,
outlined on my website. It's unchartedx.com/support. Otherwise, I hope you're all doing well, staying safe and sane here in 2021, and I'll see you all in the next one. Got a lot planned. Cheers.
Yo, this is so troll. I don't think I'm gonna get this in the next like 15 minutes. Yo, I feel so good after my workout today. Oh my god, man. Increasing the weights really like helped a lot. Guys, just looking proof. Yo, beefcake, yo. These my bennies, but I really can't afford anything right now. Oh, dang. Oh, sorry, man. Really, I'm sorry about that, man. Sorry, man. Hoping maybe...
Hello everyone, and welcome to Uncharted X. My name is Ben, and This is
Also, maybe
part
the
two
job
of
would
my
be, would
series
have
looking
helped
at
you,
the
my man.
evidence for forms of ancient
I need to open this door.
technology.
It's so hot in here.
Part 1 is worth a watch before this if you haven't seen it already. In that video, we set up some of the context around these claims for ancient high technology, how they correlate to the story of history as we know it, and then we dived into the evidence for ancient machining and polishing. In this video, we're going to look at another category of evidence for ancient high technology, the one that I think is the most convincing, that of precision. The nature of precision bears some explanation, as while it's a word we all know and hear pretty frequently, it certainly gets used constantly as a marketing term, precision this or precision that. It's a concept with some really far-reaching consequences. Our entire modern world is built on precision. We are constantly surrounded by its application, from the engines in our cars and the aircraft that we fly in, to the electronics that are omnipresent in every single device that we use, watch, or interact with. Without it, modern civilization simply wouldn't exist. Our way of life is the direct result of the relentless pursuit of precision. These days, we take the benefits of precision for granted. For example, the mass-produced and pervasive semiconductor microchips that are in all of our devices, from dishwashers to phones and computers. These all contain millions of transistors that are packaged in tiny, power-efficient silicon footprints. These tiny transistors are assembled in a process that's measured on the nanometer scale, which is to say measured in the billionths of meters. And yes, that's billion with a B. The width of a helium atom is measurable on this scale, coming in at around 0.06 of 1 nanometer. I recently read a book called The Perfectionists, How Precision Engineers Created the Modern World, written by Simon Winchester. It was recommended to me by Philip Adams in a brief email discussing the precision of the Serapeum. In this book, Winchester describes the rise of the modern pursuit of precision, beginning with its origins in the 18th century in England with the birth of accurate chronometers and developments in cannon manufacturing for the Navy, and also in the progression of the steam piston engine. All of a sudden, it started to become very important to be able to manufacture precision surfaces with low tolerances, like pistons and cylinders, such that pressurized steam didn't just leak out and could be made to do actual work. It also turns out that when the barrels of cannons are accurately bored out and rifled, which requires both the solid cast cannon and the tool that's boring it out to be held rigidly in place, they are far less prone to exploding randomly and far more likely to shoot straight. Before this development, naval cannons were made by casting the molten iron into its rough shape, including the hollow space for the barrel, and then they would fire the cannon while it was still cooling and pretty much just hope for the best. It was in small but significant leaps like this that modern precision
3,000 car repairs. Oh.
From this point on, precision drove the Industrial Revolution.
Yo, Baron, what's up, buddy?
Applications seemed endless. Modern engines are much more powerful and compact today, thanks to the precise flatness of cylinder heads and the low tolerances of pistons, rings, and balls, as well as the mechanical precision of all of their other parts. We enjoy the godlike ability to travel halfway around the world in a matter of hours by zipping through the stratosphere at nearly the speed of sound, even though we often complain bitterly about it. All mankind has the ability to send humans into space without instant death. Precision.
Yo, what's up, Wally?
Ammunition, as before we developed this capability, gun parts were handmade and had to be hand-filed to fit individual weapons. Before this, misfires, jams, or malfunctions were very common, although on the positive side, I suppose...
Yo, what's up, Wally, man? How you doing, buddy?
Ultimately, the application of precision in warfare led to the development of nuclear weapons, and now us talking monkeys have the ability to uncork Armageddon without the assistance of any space rocks or burps from the sun, so I guess it's not all heroes. Clocks, watches, and other mechanical devices got smaller and more accurate, and eventually the microelectronic and semiconductor industries were born. Our civilization progressed from measuring precision in...
How's it going, Wally? Thanks, man. Thanks for being here, dude.
...in the 1700s, right down to the nanotechnology of today that can be measured by the diameter of individual atoms. did we do this? Why did we go to all of the trouble, expense, and effort to develop and keep pushing back the boundaries of precision? This question may seem obvious, but it reveals one of the fundamental aspects of precision.
Wally's
That
back,
is its
yo.
relationship to function. We develop these expensive capabilities because they gain us notable functional benefits in their application. Inventing their capability to create hard surfaces that are perfectly flat to within 1/20th the width of a human hair is a difficult and expensive thing to do. Developing the capability to even measure such precision is equally expensive, if not more so. It requires calibration, and none of it comes naturally to us. You can't see this level of precision with your eye. You can't feel it with your hand. You need sophisticated
Well, Carl drops to come back and reclaim top 10. Yeah, really.
instruments in order to do so. We simply don't create precision manufacturing capability to this level for any other reason than function. We don't develop it for ceremonial purposes, nor do we develop it for artistic reasons.
Hey, yo,
However,
yo,
once
what's
we
up,
have
Frozens?
this type of precision manufacturing capability,
What's going on? Welcome,
it
welcome.
can be applied to all sorts of end products. Just consider a couple of examples from the modern age. Take the reductive process like 3D CNC milling machines, or an additive process like 3D printing. Whether we are making artwork or machine parts, it's the process itself that provides the precision. The process was developed in the first place so that we could gain the functional benefits of that precision, but then we can apply it to pretty much anything we want to do with the process. And this is an important point to remember when we're looking at the precision that's evident in some ancient objects, as some of these precision ancient objects appear more functional than others. So keep this point in mind as we go through the examples. Overall, I enjoyed Simon Winchester's book, as it certainly makes the case for precision forming the backbone of the modern world. One thing that I mildly disagreed with was the notion that the concept and practice of precision only began in the 18th century. I think it would be more accurate to say instead that the practice was restarted in the 18th century, or that the concept was only rediscovered at that time by modern man, as it seems clear that at some point ancient man had a pretty damn good grip on the concept and application of precision as well. Although this isn't something that you will often see or hear discussed by orthodox archaeologists, there is tremendous evidence for very high degrees of precision in many of the vastly ancient stone objects and architecture all around the world. Some of these objects display a level of precision that simply could not
Yo,
be
thank you for
matched,
following, Frozens. I
and
appreciate
by its
that. Thank you very much.
nature required sophisticated tools
Really, I appreciate
and
it.
highly advanced knowledge and capability in order to achieve. Although we find neither sophisticated tools in the archaeological record, nor any records of advanced capability in what we know of ancient civilizations, the proof that both existed at some point in the past is incontrovertible. The results of sophisticated tools and the results of these processes are still sitting right in front of our eyes in the megalithic objects and architecture that puzzle and captivate so many people from all around the world. Perhaps the best example of measured ancient precision is found in a place that I've talked about extensively on this channel, the Serapeum of Saqqara. In terms of smoking gun evidence for ancient high technology, this underground labyrinth and its 24 huge megalithic boxes is really at the top of the list. The precision of these mighty single-piece boxes and their lids, some of which weigh up to 100
the fuck,
tons,
man?
is measured in straight lines, in flat surfaces, and in the perfect squareness of corners and relative faces. These are easily understood dimensions of precision, and it's a good place to start our investigation, as we'll move on to the more complex evidence of compound curved surfaces and three-dimensional proportions of objects like the tiny stone jars and the giant granite statues afterwards. I have a 5-part series of videos dedicated to the Serapeum that's on my channel, so I'll be brief here, but if you haven't seen them, please do check out the Serapeum playlist. The link is below in the description. Using a calibrated and expensive precision straight edge, manufacturing engineer Chris Dunn has measured the inside surfaces of a couple of these boxes to be precisely and absolutely flat to within 1/20th the width of a human hair, or 0.0001 inches, which is the limit of precision. Wherever he moved this straight edge over the flat, mirror-like interior walls of the box, light did not pass underneath it, which it would have if the surface was not perfectly flat. Using a precision square, calibrated to within 5/100,000ths of an inch, or 0.00005, he found the inside faces of the boxes to not only be perfectly square and parallel to each other, but also perfectly square relative to the lid. This is a profound achievement. Remember that this all has been done in massive single-piece granite boxes. These aren't separate pieces of granite that are then bolted together, which is how we might construct something like this today. And one single mistake anywhere would mean that you need to change the entire geometry of the box. The complexity and difficulty of getting this feat perfectly correct, particularly in faces up to 10 feet apart, really can't be overstated. Now, not only was this done perfectly for one box, it appears to be a feat repeated time and time again across many of these boxes. Quoting Christopher Dunn from his article, The Amazing Boxes of the Serapeum, which you can find on his website at easypower.com. Quote, think of it as a geometric reality. In order for the lid to be square with the two inside walls, the inside walls would have to be parallel to one another along the vertical axis. Moreover, the top side of the box would need to establish a plane that is square to the sides. That makes finishing the inside exponentially more difficult. The manufacturers of these boxes in the Serapeum not only created inside surfaces that were flat when measured vertically and horizontally, they also made sure that the surfaces they were creating were square and parallel to each other, with one surface, the top, having sides that are 5 feet and 10 feet apart from each other. But without such parallelism and squareness of the top surface, the squareness noted on both sides would not exist. While it may be argued that modern men cannot impose a modern perspective on artifacts that are thousands of years old, an appreciation of the level of precision found in these artifacts is lacking in archaeological literature, and is only revealed by an understanding of what it takes to produce this kind of work. As an engineer and craftsman who has worked in manufacturing for over 40 years and who has created precision artifacts in our modern world, in my opinion, this accomplishment in prehistory deserves more recognition. Nobody does this kind of work unless there is a very high purpose for the artifact. Even the concept of this type of precision does not occur to an artisan unless there is no other means of accomplishing what the artifact is intended to do. The only other reason that such precision would be created in an object would be that the tools that are used to create it are so precise that they are incapable of producing anything less than precision. With either scenario, we are looking at a higher civilization in prehistory than what is currently accepted. To me, the implications are staggering. This is why I believe that these artifacts that I have measured in Egypt are the smoking gun that proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that a higher civilization than what we have been told existed in ancient Egypt. The evidence is cut into the stone. End quote. The Serapeum isn't the only place that one can find precision stone boxes. They're found in many pyramids and in so-called temples, as well as in other underground galleries and tunnel systems like those in the Valley of the Kings. The Egyptian Museum also has many examples of precision boxes that have been recovered from all over Egypt. The best and biggest of these boxes, however, are still down here in the Serapeum, probably because they're basically impossible to move around down here in these confined spaces, the logistics of which is a topic we'll get into later in the series, as it's also a pretty clear form of evidence recognition. The Serapeum boxes are also, at least to my knowledge, the only boxes that have been measured and tested, at least to some degree, for aspects of high precision. That analysis was done by Christopher Dunn on his own initiative, and even then was only performed on a couple of the boxes in the Serapeum and not on all of them. While many of the other precision boxes seem to have very similar characteristics to those in the Serapeum, I can't find any evidence that they've ever been tested, even by the relatively rudimentary testing which you can do with handheld precision straight edges, squares, and corner radius stones. I think this fact speaks volumes about the motives of the academics and the institutions that control the access to and the research funding for the sites and just don't seem to be that used. Yet there are and have been for years now several non-invasive techniques and tests that could easily be deployed in order to learn much more about the true nature of ancient precision that we can see in these objects. Handheld precision tools would be a start, but more modern, laser-based metrology tools could be used to determine the dimensions and tolerances over the entire surface of these artifacts. High-definition LiDAR-based 3D scanning or the emerging field of hyperspectral imaging could be used to dramatically advance our understanding of the exact nature of precision and the construction methods that we use to manufacture boxes like these. Not only boxes, but these techniques could and should be used to model and study many of the precision objects and architecture that are found around the world. It's worth noting that when you look at the various boxes in Egypt, there is also strong evidence for multiple levels of technological capability. Although they're always uniformly labelled as sarcophagi, whether it's for people or for balls, there always seems to be two types of boxes. There are the precision-made ones with straight lines, sharp corners, flat and polished surfaces, and then there are the clearly handmade boxes, which are imperfectly done and still display chisel and hammer dressing marks. Although this isn't always the case, in general, the poor quality boxes tend to come from the later periods, with the precision boxes being attributed to the older and earlier periods. Even the oldest box known, an 8-ton single piece of granite that is under Mastaba 17 at Maidun, appears to be a precision-made box, and it's not something that's been roughly carved by hand. We have here examples of the same backwards progression of technological capability, the same contradiction in the story of history that is demonstrated in general by the Old Kingdom of Egypt when it's held up relative to the rest of the Egyptian civilization. If we can't explain how the dynastic Egyptians made these boxes with what we know of their primitive capabilities or with the tools that we have in the archaeological record, does it not make more sense that they might have inherited these objects? They might have used them for ceremony and imitated them. They might have tried to create their own boxes, ones that are explainable by their tools and are explainable with their known capabilities. Here at the site of Tanis, you have the two types of boxes actually lined up side by side. One is clearly precision made and the other is obviously not. They reflect vastly different levels of capability and technology, and only one of these matches what we know about the tools and techniques of the dynastic Egyptians. Before I move on, I do want to take a minute to acknowledge and thank Christopher Dunn for his contribution to the world in this field. His book, Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt, is, in my opinion, incredibly important work, and I think that it will be widely recognised as such in years to come. So we've established that while precision seems to have existed deep in the past, it's only something that our civilization has recently developed and then put to significant use over the last 200 to 300 years. The fact is that it wasn't until after we had begun our own modern voyage down the path of precision that we even had the capability to notice and accurately measure ancient forms of precision, or to even appreciate the sophistication of the manufacturing techniques that were required to achieve it. This evidence has been sitting in front of humanity for thousands of years, like some sort of coded message sent down through time, but it's one that we've only relatively recently developed the capability to reach. Sir William Flinders Petrie was one of the very first to apply our civilization's knowledge of precision and manufacturing to the objects of ancient Egypt, and he did so to various degrees across his work through the late 1800s and early 1900s. He observed and quantified the drilling and machining marks that are left in artifacts, and he measured and speculated on the techniques required to manufacture the many ancient stone vases and vessels that come from the oldest times of ancient Egypt. These stone jars, bowls, or other objects are truly remarkable pieces that, by their very nature, provide proof that advanced manufacturing techniques and precision were alive and well deep in the distant past. Found in the tens of thousands, these vases and objects are today mostly associated with the very earliest periods of ancient Egypt, even the first and second dynasties, as well as the archaic and pre-dynastic periods, which is a huge clue right there, as these periods are quite literally considered stone. The range range of shapes and materials used in the manufacture of these jars and vases is both wide and varied. Some are tiny, almost as if they're made for teasings of their capability, and some are quite large, but they all seem to display a frankly astonishing degree of symmetry and precision. This jar is one of my favourites, and it seems to have been so precisely made and so well balanced that it can stand upright on its tiny base, almost like an egg standing up to its tip. Many jars seem to be made this way, and while I've not had the privilege of handling them directly in order to test this, I'd like to see anyone try and make these by hand with copper chisels and the known techniques of engineering. All I can say is good luck. While some vases or jars seem very solid, others are almost ridiculously thin, to the point of transparency, like these examples. In some cases, like this vase that has suffered some damage, we can get an idea of just how thin this material is. Shaping and carving out the inside angles and the inside cavities of these jars, some through very long and narrow necks, and then keeping the material thickness consistent and accurate, is an extraordinarily difficult challenge when working in very hard stone. Quoting Flinders Petrie from his article in the 1884 Journal of the Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland, quote, "The finest examples of turning in hard stone are in the British Museum. A small, highly polished, narrow-necked vase in diorite, or rather in transparent quartz, with veins of hornblende, has its neck only 0.05 inches thick. A large vase of cyanide is turned, inside and out, remarkably thin, considering the size of the component crystals. But the greatest triumph is a bowl of diorite, number 4796, translucent and full of minute flaws, which must render it very brittle. Yet this bowl, 6 inches diameter, is only 1/40th of an inch, or 0.02
Come on, what?
inches thick, over its greatest part. Just around the edge it is thicker in order to strengthen it, but a small chip broken out of the body of it shows its extraordinary thinness, no stouter than thin crackle.
Wow.
An alabaster
Thanks for
vase
watching.
of
I'm done for tonight. Thank you for the follow, Frozen. I really appreciate it. Hour and a half? Jeez, man. No, thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you. I really appreciate it, Joey and Wally and Baron and Frozen's and Dick. I really appreciate it. And Joey and everyone. Thank you. Is anyone online? Let's see.
Conglomerate, quartz, basalt, and even obsidian. These small objects are typically made from some of the hardest and most difficult to work materials you can find. There is one vase that I know of that is made from corundum. And yes, this is corundum. There are several forms of it. It doesn't all...
Alright, let's read
gemstone.
Goodle
And
Shoes.
corundum
We're
is
doing
a
it.
9 on the Mohs scale of hardness. It's the hardest substance on Earth next to diamond. Supposedly these were all made by hand with basic hand tools, flint or copper chisels.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much.
crystal vessel and obsidian.
Peace out.
Remember, we don't also got obsidian when we